Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit this subscribe button, so you never miss a story like this. And also comments where you are watching from, how many sons and daughters you have. Thanks. My name is Linda Carter. I'm from a small town in Ohio, and if there's one thing life has taught me, it's this: respect isn't something you give because of age, it's something you earn every single day. On my 65th birthday, I learned that the people closest to you can cut the deepest. 65 and still dreaming, my husband, Mark, scoffed across the dinner table, his voice dripping with mockery while our friends laughed. I felt the heat rush to my face, my fork frozen in midair. Say that again, I shot back, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from rage. I could feel everyone's eyes darting between us, waiting for me to laugh it off. But I wasn't laughing. Because little did Mark know, the letter I had in my purse would wipe that smug grin right off his face. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud, it's written in black and white. You've spent your whole life playing pretend, Linda, Mark continued, waving his wine glass like some kind of king delivering a verdict. You've had these silly little goals, art classes, writing your book, starting that small business, none of which ever went anywhere. And now? You're too old. You missed your shot. His words felt like a slap, not because they were true, but because they came from the man I'd shared my life with for over 4 decades. Around the table, I saw forced smiles, awkward glances, people silently begging for the tension to break. But I wasn't going to be the one to break it. Not this time. I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. You have no idea what you're talking about, Mark. None. My heart pounded in my chest, not from weakness, but from holding back the tidal wave of truth I'd been carrying for weeks. For years, I had swallowed every insult, every moment he made me feel small, every time he played the charming husband in public while tearing me down in private. But now? I could taste the end of that chapter. He smirked, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Oh, Linda, always so sensitive. You know I'm just joking. Can't you take a joke? My blood boiled. A joke? That's what you call 40 years of belittling me? That's what you call laughing at my dreams in front of our friends? You don't get to hide behind that word anymore, Mark. Not tonight. His jaw twitched. He didn't like when I pushed back. Not in front of people. Not when he couldn't control the narrative. The room was silent except for the faint clinking of ice in someone's glass. I could feel every eye on me, but I didn't care. You think because you built a career, because your name's on the house deed, because you wear the expensive watch I picked for your 50th, that makes you the king of this marriage? No, Mark. All it's made you is a man who forgot the woman who stood by him when he had nothing. You've forgotten the late nights I stayed up typing your work reports when you were too tired. You've forgotten how I sold my grandmother's jewelry to help you make your first business payment. And you've forgotten the one thing you should have remembered: never underestimate the quiet one. Mark leaned back, forcing a chuckle, but his eyes told a different story. He was rattled. Good. Linda, this is your birthday. Let's not make a scene, he said, trying to regain control. Oh, we're already past that, I replied, my voice steady. You started this scene. I'm just giving it the ending it deserves. My hand slipped into my purse, fingers brushing the crisp envelope inside. It was all I could do not to pull it out right then and there. But no, he needed to stew in his arrogance a little longer. He needed to think he was still winning. You're being dramatic, he said, shaking his head. I'm being honest, I shot back. Something you haven't been in years. His lips pressed into a thin line. You really want to do this? Here? In front of everyone? The fact that he asked that question told me everything. He cared more about his image than about me. Always had. Always would. But tonight, I was done protecting him. Around the table, our friends shifted uncomfortably. Some looked down at their plates, others pretended to check their phones. But I could feel it, the curiosity, the electricity in the air. They knew something big was coming. And it was. "You've spent years making me feel small, Mark," I said, my voice soft now, almost trembling, but with steel underneath. "But tonight, I'm going to remind you just how big I can be." He laughed again, but this time it was hollow. "Oh? And how are you planning to do that?" I held his gaze for a long moment, then smiled, a smile he didn't recognize. "You'll find out soon enough. In fact, you'll find out before the cake." That's when I saw it, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He didn't like not knowing. He didn't like surprises unless he was the one giving them. And this one? This one would knock the crown right off his head. Because tucked inside that envelope was a truth that would turn our marriage, our reputation, and his precious image upside down. And I wasn't going to whisper it. I was going to read it out loud, word for word, for every single person at that table to hear. I sat back, letting the tension simmer, my fingers still resting on the envelope in my purse. My heart was racing, but not from fear. It was anticipation. For the first time in years, I held the power. And the beautiful part? He had no idea what was coming. Some birthdays, you blow out candles and make a wish. But on my 65th, I wasn't wishing. I was delivering. Delivering a truth so sharp, so undeniable, that it would slice through every lie he'd ever told about me. And the best part? He would never see it coming. Mark shifted in his chair, adjusting his cufflinks like he could smooth over the crack I'd just put in his confidence. He glanced at the others, forcing another laugh, as if to say, "Look at my silly wife, always overreacting." But I saw it. That tiny twitch in his jaw, the subtle swallow when he thought no one was looking. He was nervous, even if he didn't want to admit it. "You're turning this into something it's not, Linda," he said, his voice lower now, more controlled, the way he spoke when he wanted to sound reasonable. "It's your birthday. We should be celebrating, not arguing." I stared at him for a long moment, letting the silence press on him. "Mark," I said finally, my tone slow, deliberate, "for 40 years, I've celebrated you. Your promotions. Your milestones. Your dreams. But tonight? Tonight's not about you. It's about me. And I'm done pretending I'm fine with being the punchline of your jokes." He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance to interrupt. "Do you know what it's like to spend your life with someone who smiles in public and sneers in private? Do you know what it's like to have the person you trust most make you feel like you're never enough? I bet you don't. Because you've never had to feel small a day in your life, have you?" One of our friends shifted in her seat, her eyes darting to the others as if asking silently, "Should we stop this?" No one did. And why would they? This wasn't just a fight, it was a reckoning. Mark gave a tight smile, the one he used in business meetings when he was trying not to lose his temper. "Linda, you're making yourself look bad." My laugh came out sharp, almost cutting. "No, Mark. I'm making the truth look good. And soon, everyone here is going to hear it." His eyes flicked to my purse, then back to my face. He knew I was holding something back. He just didn't know how bad it was going to be. Mark's eyes stayed locked on my purse like it was a ticking bomb. In a way, it was. But instead of wires and explosives, it held words, carefully printed on crisp paper, that could blow his entire facade to pieces. He leaned forward now, voice dropping to that low, warning tone I'd heard in private arguments over the years. "Linda, don't do this." That was the problem. For 40 years, I'd listened when he said don't. Don't argue. Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass me. And every single time I obeyed. I kept the peace. I swallowed my pride. I smiled while my dignity crumbled inside me. But tonight, something in me snapped. "Don't?" I repeated, my voice rising just enough for the people at the far end of the table to hear. "Mark, the only reason you're still sitting here so smug is because I've kept quiet for too long. But here's the thing, silence has an expiration date. And mine ran out tonight." I could feel the air shift in the room. A few guests had stopped eating entirely, their forks suspended in midair. One of the men actually leaned forward in his seat, like he was afraid to miss a single word. This wasn't polite dinner conversation anymore. This was a storm, and they were all caught in the middle of it. Mark tried again, this time with a more pleading edge. Look, you're upset. We can talk about this later. Just, let's enjoy the evening. Everyone came here to celebrate you. I shook my head, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. No, Mark. They came here because you told them it would be a party. But you didn't invite them to celebrate me, you invited them to laugh at me. Just like you always do. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing around as if the crowd could save him. No one did. Not a single person spoke up in his defense. And I knew why, because they'd seen it too. The little digs. The casual humiliations. The way he turned me into a punchline. It wasn't new. It was just the first time I was answering back in front of witnesses. My fingers curled tighter around the envelope in my purse. I could feel the ridge of the paper beneath my thumb, the weight of it pressing against my palm. I'd read it a dozen times alone in our kitchen, my hands shaking each time, knowing what it meant. Knowing that once I spoke these words aloud, nothing in our lives would ever be the same. Mark must have sensed it, because his voice turned cold. Linda, if you pull that letter out, you're going to regret it. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. The only thing I regret, Mark, is that I didn't do this sooner. And with that, I drew the envelope out of my purse and set it on the table between us. The room went dead silent. No one moved. No one breathed. Every pair of eyes was fixed on that small, unassuming rectangle of paper. This, I said, my voice calm now, steady, is going to change everything. I slid my finger beneath the seal and tore it open slowly, deliberately, like I wanted him to feel every second of it. My hands didn't shake, not anymore. I'd rehearsed this moment in my mind too many times to let nerves get in the way now. I unfolded the crisp white paper and held it up, my eyes never leaving his. This, I began, my voice carrying across the table, is a letter addressed to me. But in truth, it's about you, Mark. Every word. Every sentence. And the best part? You can't talk your way out of this one. I glanced down and began to read. Mrs. Carter, it is my honor to inform you that your late aunt, Margaret, has left you as the sole heir to her estate. A murmur rippled through the room. Mark's eyes narrowed, but he stayed silent. This includes her home, her savings account, and the ownership of Carter and Lowe Industries. I looked up at him then, watching the color drain from his face. Yes. Carter and Lowe Industries. His company. His pride. His life's work. Except, what most people didn't know, was that the Lowe in the name wasn't just a silent partner. It was my aunt. She'd bankrolled his startup all those years ago, quietly, privately, because she believed in him, and because she believed in me. And now that she was gone, every share she owned, every controlling vote, was mine. I saw his hand tighten around his wine glass, the tendons in his wrist standing out. I let the silence stretch before I continued reading. We trust you will handle these assets with wisdom and care, and know that your late aunt was immensely proud of the woman you have become. I folded the letter slowly and placed it back in the envelope. My voice was steady as I said, so you see, Mark, I may be 65. I may have been the butt of your jokes for years. But as of today, I own the company you built your ego on. I own the home we live in. And I own the future you thought was yours alone. The room was so silent I could hear my own breathing. Mark's jaw was tight, his face pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. And for the first time in 40 years, I was the one smiling while he scrambled for something to say. Mark blinked rapidly, his gaze flicking from me to the letter and back again, like he was still trying to process the words. His lips parted, but nothing came out, only a small, shallow breath that betrayed just how rattled he was. He set his wine glass down too quickly, the stem clinking against the table. Linda, this isn't, he began, but I cut him off before he could find his footing. Not what it looks like? Oh no, Mark, it's exactly what it looks like. For years, you've acted like I was just some tag-along in your life, a spectator to your so-called success. You told everyone you built it, you fought for it, you made it happen. But here's the truth, without my aunt's money, you wouldn't have had a single brick to stand on. And without me, she never would have believed in you in the first place. A gasp came from somewhere near the end of the table. One of our oldest friends, Carol, was staring at me like she'd just seen a ghost. You mean? You're the reason Mark got the company started? She asked. I nodded. Every penny he needed came from my family. And in return, he spent 40 years making me feel like a charity case in my own marriage. Mark's face flushed deep red now, and I knew it wasn't embarrassment, it was rage. You think this changes anything? You don't know the first thing about running a business, he spat, his voice sharp, desperate. I leaned forward, my elbows on the table, and smiled. Maybe not. But I know how to hire someone who does. And the first decision I'm making as the owner of Carter & Lowe is to remove you as CEO, effective immediately. The room erupted in whispers, the sound of shock bouncing off the walls like a wave. Mark stared at me, utterly stunned, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for air. He glanced at the guests, probably hoping for sympathy, but all he found were widened eyes and a few people shaking their heads in quiet disbelief. You can't be serious, he said finally, his voice cracking just enough for me to notice. Oh, I've never been more serious in my life, I replied, standing from my chair. My hand rested on the envelope, now lying in front of me like a trophy. For 40 years, you've been laughing at me. Tonight? I'm laughing at you. And with that, I tucked the letter back into my purse, smoothed my dress, and walked out, leaving him sitting there in front of all our friends, stripped of his power, his pride, and the only image he'd ever cared about. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I could still hear the low hum of voices behind me, Mark's voice no longer booming, no longer in control. For the first time in decades, the weight on my chest was gone. I wasn't his shadow anymore. I wasn't the woman who laughed at the right moments and kept quiet when it counted. I was me again. I thought about all the birthdays I'd spent smiling through his jabs, all the sacrifices I'd made quietly, thinking one day he might notice. But the truth was, some people don't change when you give them love, they just take more. And if you let them, they'll take everything. So I didn't just walk away with a letter. I walked away with my dignity, my independence, and the knowledge that I'd waited long enough to finally take my life back. Because respect isn't given because of age, or marriage, or history, it's given because you demand it. And on my 65th birthday, I demanded mine.